Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Is that right? Are we live? Good morning to the world and to those of you who are here in this room. I'm Catherine Bush, part of the clergy team here at Calvary, and it's good to be with you on this second Sunday in the Easter season. We're going to look at some poems, poems today. We were also going to look at art, but the copy machine thought that was a bad idea. And so I have like two handouts. I don't have enough for sharing, so we'll just read poetry. That's my default setting anyway. And as folks may be still arriving, I do want to read for y'all. We won't spend a lot of time commenting on it, but Scott's Easter sermon included this poem by Marie Howe, and sometimes it's nice to hear something again and to be able to read along if you didn't have it in front of you on Sunday morning. So we'll start with this as kind of our launch point, and then get into the conversation from there. Hey, y'all. So this poem is called Easter by Marie Howe. Two of the fingers on his right hand had been broken. So when he poured back into that hand, it surprised him. It hurt him at first. And the whole body was too small. Imagine the sky trying to fit into a tunnel carved into a hill. He came at it two ways, from the outside as we step into a pair of pants, and from the center, suddenly, all at once. Then he felt himself awake, in the dark, alone. So this has fit into beautiful celebrations and sermons on Easter Sunday. And for those of you who are part of our Tuesday morning Bible study, we spent a little bit more time talking about it on Tuesday. So it has had legs, as we say. And I think too, again, this Easter season is so beautiful and so mysterious. It's just so hard to figure out sometimes how to talk about resurrection. And as we'll hear this morning in another wonderful sermon about, there's a part of this story that is so about bodies that have broken fingers and wounded sides and need to be touched and held. And then there's something about these stories that is strange, that a figure that can pass through walls and that is the same but isn't the same, is not recognizable to the people who knew him most closely. So there's this kind of strangeness and foreignness about what exactly is happening. And I think it can be nice for a couple things. One thing is to remember that Easter, of course, is a whole season, and we've got 50 days to sit in these stories and to hear these encounters. But also that we're going to continue to get kind of different ideas as different people try to kind of say, I think maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like this, instead of saying, no, you're wrong. It's not like that. But to say, and also, or maybe this too, and this, and to keep adding images and ideas and experiences as we go. So one of the, in John's gospel, one of the kind of core visions of the resurrection story is Mary Magdalene's encounter with Jesus on the Easter morning. So we're going back a week to Easter morning in a garden. And it's the garden where his tomb is. It's the garden where his body has been laid, where she has gone to find just that, only to find a body, not to find anything else. And this poignant, beautiful story where she starts talking to this man who the line in Scripture is, supposing him to be the gardener. And that mistake, that mistaken identity, I think is to me has always been particularly intriguing. It's one of my favorite lines in all of Scripture, supposing him to be the gardener. And it spawned a lot of creative thought around these ideas. And we can't help but realize that for those of us who are in this hemisphere in the Western world, it's springtime. So the flowers are the flowers, and the garden is the garden, and everything is actually blooming, and the green blade riseth, and all of that is true. So the the kind of confluence of the story alongside the natural world that we're all living in. Just kind of, it's a chicken and egg thing where one keeps feeding the other. So I have a few poems about gardens and gardeners to share with you. So I think what I'll do is read at least 2, maybe 3 of them, and then we'll pause. Thank you for being the hostess with the mostest and getting everybody packets. Because of course nobody wanted to come sit all the way over here. Okay, so this first one is called Spring Song by Lucille Clifton. Spring Song. The green of Jesus is breaking the ground, and the sweet smell of delicious Jesus is opening the house, and the dance of Jesus, music has hold of the air, and the world is turning in the body of Jesus, and the future is possible. I'm going to read that again because it's short. Spring Song. The green of Jesus is breaking the ground, and the sweet smell of delicious Jesus is opening the house, and the dance of Jesus, music, has hold of the air, and the world is turning in the body of Jesus, and the future is possible. So a few times in the poetry that we're sharing where this last line, the future is possible, this idea of what ultimately resurrection means, when we try to get our feeble little brains around it. I was not expecting big crowd today. So you'll have to share from now on. Now anybody else who comes in, you have to share. So the future is possible, right? This idea of if the resurrection means anything, it means that there's more. There's more to the story. There's more to life. There's more than we can imagine. There's more. I also really love this Lucille Clifton poem. I get kind of flummoxed when there's no punctuation. I'm a kind of a punctuation girl. But again, when we're trying to talk about this thing that's so hard to talk about, and all the ways that you can read some of these lines, the green of Jesus is breaking the ground. Jesus is breaking the ground, and the sweet smell of delicious Jesus is opening the. I mean, you can kind of keep moving it all around, and it lands differently every time, which is great poetry because of course it's Lucille Clifton, but it's also kind of, if I could say anything, this kind of idea of like there are a lot of ways to tell the story. There are a lot of ways that people met Jesus. There are a lot of ways to think about resurrection. There are a lot of ways to read this really short, simple little poem. And as we try to get our brains, which are this sized, around something that is cosmic and massive, maybe we don't need as many commas and semicolons and periods, right? We just let all the words kind of spill all over the place. So this green and imagery continues in Andrew Hudgens' poem, a little more concrete, Christ as a Gardener. The boxwoods planted in the park spelled L-I-V-E. I never noticed it until they died. Before, the entwined green had smudged the word unreadable. And when they take their own advice again, come spring, come Easter, no one will know a word is buried in the leaves. I love the way that Mary thought her resurrected Lord a gardener. It wasn't just the broad-brimmed hat and muddy robe that fooled her. He was that changed. He looks across the unturned field, the riot of unscythed grass, the smattering of wildflowers. Before he can stop himself, he's on his knees. He roots up stubborn weeds, pinches the suckers, deciding order here, what lives, what dies, and how. But it goes deeper even than that. His hands burn and his bare feet smolder. He longs to lie down in the long, dew-moist furrows and press his pierced side and his broken forehead into the dirt. But he's already done it, passed through one death and out on the other side. He laughs. He kicks his bright spade in the earth and turns it over. Spring flashes by, then harvest. Beneath his feet, seeds dance into the air. They rise, and he, not noticing, ascends on midair stepping stones of dandelion, of milkweed, thistle, cattail, and goldenrod. I wonder if there are lines or images. Oh, yeah. Do you want to?
I'll be here.
Oh, thanks. Lines or images in this that are particularly striking, that capture something for you or help to kind of put words to this unsayable business?
I love the part about before he can stop himself.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like, oh.
I need to fix this. I need to do this, right? And that kind of urge that I can't stop myself. Yeah, I love that.
Well, having grown up in South Florida, where there's really not much in the way of seasons, it's pretty much green, hotter and more humid, but green. And then spending 2 different winter seasons, 3 months and 3 years and 4 years in northern Illinois and Massachusetts. It's so different. Here we get a little taste of it when spring comes.
Yeah.
And if you go outside and breathe through the pollen and stuff, and things
Then
pop.
there's pollen, right?
But when you're that far north and it's that cold,
Yeah.
it's like
Right.
pop,
So yeah.
everything really pops, comes out at you fast. It just
Right.
doesn't ease its way out, but pops.
Interesting. Yeah, and that kind of surprise, like, oh, it's here all of a sudden.
So, sort of like the live.
Yes,
But you don't
right.
know it's there until-
you don't know it's there until it's
until
yeah,
you get it,
and
get it, get it.
there it is. I had a friend when I was in seminary she was from upstate New York, and we're in school in Virginia, and this is the opposite of what Easter is like. So spring starts to come. You start to get, Lenten roses and early daffodils and all of that kind of thing, sometimes in February. And she looked at me one day and she said, I don't know how you people do Lent. It looks like spring already. And she was used to like at the end of winter up north where it's not just snowy, it's like the piles of old snow and it's gray and it's just, you're tired of it all. And she's like, that is what Lent should feel like. So it's that opposite seasonal effect of depending on where you live. Yeah, Mary.
What caught my eye was about 2/3 of the way down, his hands burn and his bare feet smolder. He longs to lie down inside the long, dew-moist furrows and press his pierced side and his broken forehead into the dirt. And I don't know, I was just thinking about, the suffering that Jesus went through,
Yeah.
and then just, was that somehow refreshing or comforting to
Right,
him?
how
So
visceral, you would just
that
want
was
to
just
lie
very,
down.
I could
Yeah.
just see that whole,
Yeah.
the way they described it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. Every time I read that, I'm like, oh, you just want to like curl up and like pack into something that would be soothing and cooling and relieving. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
also just such a great, like, when we say God loves the world, that's a very abstract I don't know what that means, but I know he loves the world in this poem. Jesus loves the world. This affection is just
Yeah.
a gardener lying down in the
Yeah.
fruitfulness of the earth.
And he
like
can't help himself,
just
right? That
deep
he just
affection.
has to touch and be part of it. Yeah. Yeah.
The other part that I love is the last part, the milkweed, the thistle, the cattail, and the goldenrod, because they
Yeah.
all go poof.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
scatter
Spread
like that,
everything
don't they?
everywhere.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. This is somebody who knows. I mean, this is somebody with botanical understanding. And so when we move from the resurrection to the ascension, and it's this kind of like, there it all goes, right? Yeah.
Okay, just got to throw this in then.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about it. But what does Jesus say when Mary hangs on to him? Don't cling to me.
Do not cling to me.
You can't cling to those puffs.
Right.
as real as
Right.
they
I have
are,
not
we
yet
can't
ascended
just-
to my Yeah.
I
Yep.
love that.
Right. Okay, so we have more to go, and we have one more garden poem or gardening poem, kind of. That is, it's a branch, it's a rabbit trail, but I got to make the packet, so I got to pick. This is by Ross Gay, who is himself. He's a poet and an essayist and a prolific, talented gardener, and his life is very centered around the natural world and gardening and urban gardening and communal gardens and all this. So he knows of what he speaks. A small needful fact is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec, Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he put gently into the earth some plants which, most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to grow, continue to do what such plants do, like house and feed small and necessary creatures, like being pleasant to touch and smell, like converting sunlight into food, like making it easier for us to breathe. So Eric Garner is one of the stories of 2020, one of the victims of police brutality. He was pulled over. He is in his car. He had a permit and a gun, but he had a gun and a permit for it, and he was trying to reach for his permit, and the policeman shot him. And this is in Minnesota, I think. So one of the cascading stories that fed that season of reckoning in so many ways. And so Ross Gay, himself an African-American man who's been very outspoken and needfully so, engaged in these conversations, reminding us that this man lives on, right? And I think we can get a little cute sometimes about, the legacy of people, and as if that's enough, because really we're just devastated with grief when people are gone, and it's not enough to say, oh, but look, we still have her this and such, or we still have his that and such. But I think the way that he takes this story and moves us through the work that this man had done with his hands, and then it does have a lasting impact, it does continue on. It is only a metaphor for life beyond death, but it is a metaphor, right? And all of the layers of this about, what he reached for with his hands and making it easier for us to breathe, and all of this is very poignant and very intentional in the language and the way that he tells the story. And I know that it's not a story about Jesus and the garden, but I think it just speaks to this kind of, again, the mystery and the conundrum that we are all kind of carrying about. We can have a story about Jesus, and we can have a story about this ancient experience of life and death and resurrection, and then we all have our own, and our own stories and our own experiences, our own losses, and our own coming to terms with that. And so for me, it kind of weaves in as we're speaking of gardeners. So I'll offer you that, and if there's a comment or a question, I'm happy to pause there for a moment. We'll wait for Mimsy to come in. Yeah.
This comment isn't about what you just said.
that's right.
This is about the previous
Sure,
reading.
please.
And it reminded me how God created the world.
Right, yeah, it's a whole
And
other
then we
layer.
have Jesus re-experiencing that again after he rose from the dead.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of creation, there's so many ways that we can go back to the beginning of creation, of a garden, of a place where things went wrong, and then a place where things go wrong again, and then a place where things go right, right? There's just so much kind of literal layering. So I see that too. And that like the act of creation itself is so part of that. Yeah.
Today, Jesus breathes on the disciples.
Yeah.
So the breath kind of took
So-
my breath away. Was it
Oh, yeah.
Michael
right.
Brown who said, I can't breathe?
I can't breathe.
As he
Yeah.
was in
so,
a similar...
no,
George-
it's
was
George
it
Floyd.
George
who's-
Floyd
yeah.
that said, I can't breathe?
Yes. Michael Brown is Ferguson.
sure there was
George
an
Floyd
echo
is,
there
yeah.
of that.
Yeah, and that's part of what Ross Gay is doing, I think, is layering those stories.
And breath is spirit, and breath is
Yeah.
wind.
Wind
in
and
the
spirit
old
and all that. Yeah.
languages,
Candace?
some understand.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was the guy in New York who was selling loose cigarettes.
Oh, right. Who's I can't breathe. Right. Yes. Thank you. Because there's so many stories, and that's the tragedy of and the blur of that. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But this came back to him because it talked about his very large hands, and
Yeah.
I just thought that was a beautiful thing.
Yeah. It's really beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to stay kind of adjacent to John's gospel, and thank you, Scott. I'll give you $5 later for the segue to breath. That's great. Because the next story, and this is actually the story that you'll hear this morning. So we didn't get to hear Mary Magdalene in the garden this year liturgically, which is just a loss, frankly, as far as I'm concerned, for the lectionary. But that's where we are in John's gospel. It's Sunday morning. Mary Magdalene meets him in the garden. We get to talk about gardens for a while. Now it's that night. And this is where we pick up in our lectionary in the gospel today. It's that night, and everyone is, well, the men folk are in a room with the doors locked, right? Because they're scared, which makes a lot of sense. No disrespect on being afraid, because I live with a lot of fear. And that story picks up there. So they're in the room, and the doors are locked, and Jesus arrives. And this is, again, when we get this kind of conundrum of like body, no body. He just kind of came through a wall, maybe. That seems strange. But he's got a body that we can touch. It's inconsistent, which is kind of delightful. With that story in mind, and then this is going to lead to the first time Thomas is not there, second, and then a week later, they're back in the room, doors are locked again, Jesus appears again, and this time Thomas is there. More to come from the preacher on that. So that's the story now that we're going to, and the headspace that I want you to kind of move toward. The World I Live In by Mary Oliver. I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? You wouldn't believe what once or twice I've seen. I'll just tell you this. Only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. So there's a little Clifton callback to this language of maybe and the life possible. The future is possible, she said. I read this poem, and for me personally, it is not a rebuke, it is a call, it is an invitation, though, because I know that I can be a locked door kind of person. I can be a orderly house kind of person. And so this invitation to say, it's wider than that, there's more than that, and anyway, that's never going to stop God, right? That my locked doors and rooms are not going to inhibit the arrival or the presence of God, thank goodness. So her language of I have refused to live locked in the orderly house of reasons and proofs. The world I live in and believe in is wider than that. And anyway, what's wrong with maybe? And then she moves into angels and these kind of encounters. But I think it is, in all of these stories that we're reading from Scripture and hopefully some of these poems, there is this sense of, okay, so this is how we kind of, we struggle, we encounter, we wonder, we're curious, we're afraid, we're all of these things, and we name all of that. And in her, I hear a little bit of like, kind of somebody to come up to the disciples and say, hey guys, maybe you could open your doors, maybe you could open your eyes, maybe you could open your, and not just hey guys, but she's saying that to me as well. And I'll offer you this next poem too, and then we'll pause for some responses and conversations. And I don't know where Jane Kenyon's name went, but Jane Kenyon wrote the next poem, Briefly It Enters, Briefly It Speaks, by Jane Kenyon. Briefly it enters and briefly speaks. I am the blossom pressed in a book, found again after 200 years. I am the maker, the lover, and the keeper. When the young girl who starves sits down to a table, she will sit beside me. I am food on the prisoner's plate. I am water rushing to the wellhead, filling the pitcher until it spills. I am the patient gardener of the dry and weedy garden. I am the stone step, the latch, and the working hinge. I am the heart contracted by joy, the longest hair white before the rest. I am there in the basket of fruit presented to the widow. I am the musk rose opening unattended, the fern in on the boggy summit. I am the one whose love overcomes you, already with you when you think to call my name. Jane Kenyon and actually Mary Oliver, in some ways, both of these women have these stories where they are raised in a faithful family household that was also complicated and had its own shadow sides. They both drift away, and they both, in their own ways, return. Mary Oliver to the Episcopal Church, which we love. Jane Kenyon and her, maybe less, I don't actually know if she landed in a denomination, but a lot of her later poems really do look at these kind of religious and spiritual questions that she was holding. She dies tragically young of leukemia, but she had this same arc and story, I think, that it's in a, Mary Oliver had a much longer life, but they have a similar kind of like raised in a story, walked away from it, returned to it, kind of trying to seek and to struggle with those questions. But I wonder if there are, her poem, Jane Kenyon's poem is full of images, also a lot of I am. We're in the Gospel of John. Whether she made that connection or not, it's certainly in my head. What else is striking to you about these?
I love in the Mary Oliver poem, What's Wrong with Maybe?
What's wrong with maybe?
And that only if there are angels in your head will there ever possibly see one. I think all too often we say it's either black or white, yes or no, and we don't leave room for possibilities.
Yeah, and maybes. Yeah, maybe, right? Yeah, thanks for that.
I mentioned the riff on Frederick Buechner in the sermon today, but he always struck me as someone who helped me by, like, the difference for faith is going from what if it's not true to what if it is. Like, I felt like in Buechner it was like, what if it is?
Yeah.
And that feels like exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's still very open. It's still very, maybe. Heather?
Sorry, I walked in late. We were having breakfast, and I'm like, wow, I just came in, pulled out a napkin. I get so emotional, and this was so beautiful. It really was and is. That I feel like so often I live in that world of like, where I have a feeling or I'm describing something and he's like, where's the proof? Tell me right now. And so it really hit me because I get that a lot. And I just freeze up and I'm like, I just know, and this was just like, oh, wow. I mean, because sometimes this is the description. I'm going to memorize this so I can pull it out.
Oh, good, good. Everybody should memorize a poem or two. Yeah.
I love that. and also the other poem, just to kind of flip yourself is to thinking of yourself as, the food that is feeding. I mean, I just think that's so beautiful. And so it really is very touching. And I think I'm going to both digest these when I get home. So thanks for letting me walk in late to
always.
this beautiful immersive experience.
Other images or Kate?
My favorite line here is, I am the one whose love overcomes you, already with you when you think to call my name.
Yeah.
I sometimes forget that I'm asking, where are you? Where are you? And he's there.
Already.
Already there.
Yep. I'm the one whose love overcomes you, already with you when you think to call. When you get around to asking for me, I'm already there, right? Yeah. There's a gift at some point, a little plaque in my office that says, "Bidden or not bidden, God is present." Right. This already there, whether I asked or not. It's a good reminder. Yeah. Others? Yeah, Michelle.
I was going to say, to link the Mary Oliver poem back to who was it? The one about the LIVE.
Yeah.
Right? So thinking about only if there are angels in your head will you ever possibly see one. I think it's the reticulator activated system that like whatever you start to look for, you will see everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And so like if you all of a sudden think, I'm going to buy a Subaru, you will see nothing but
Subarus.
Subarus.
And it's not just the algorithm.
Right.
These days it's kind of the
No.
algorithm, but this is actually a real human thing, right?
Right, and so thinking about that with, if you don't have something that you can imagine,
Yeah.
how could you possibly see it?
Right. Yeah, right. That we have to have something that kind of cracks the door to possibility and maybe, or whether they're angels in your head or something else, that unless you know to look for it, you won't look for it. or you won't, or it'll be there and you won't see it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Nancy? And then Ann?
I just like this little part. I'm the stone step, the latch, the working hinge, as opposed to a non-working hinge.
Yeah,
which
actually,
is
yeah.
so incredibly important.
Yes, yes, you're
and
so right.
especially in
Yeah.
the yard, in the
Yes.
garden, and
A rusty old,
having a little stone step so you're not just stepping in the mud all the time. I love those images.
yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Ann, were you going to?
When you were reminding us of the all the I am statements in John, and I was thinking about how those are so familiar to us that we kind of don't. I mean,
Right, yeah.
they're
I am the
not
bread of
shocking
life.
in
Yeah,
any
I am
kind
the
of
bread
way.
of life. I am the, yeah. Right.
They're not shocking, but this one, they are kind of shocking, you know. And so I think, wonder if that's how Jesus's followers felt. The way we're reading this and going, what? The patient gardener, what?
Right.
The stone step, what?
What?
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. How it's like, huh?
Right,
This
because
is
it's the first
interesting.
time.
The first
right?
time, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
I love that.
And that, so what
thought.
he would have been saying to your point, to the followers, it would have, I mean, I think this is regularly lost on us. The parables were shocking, right? The I am statements were bizarre. Like all of this things, all the things that we've gotten used to over 2,000 years of it just being like, ba-dum-bum, you know, we know the end of the story. But it would have been like, musk rose? What in the world? You know, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Since you said that, I am, something that got cut out of the sermon today was this sense that in John, the I am statements are so big that when Jesus is in the garden in John, he's not praying the cry of dereliction. He's not saying, my God, have you, he's not saying, let this cup pass before me. He says, they say, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth. I am he, and the soldiers fall over. Like he's like a superhero. And after the resurrection, this is what the sermon will be about, all these tender, specific, concrete, tiny references like that poem, like the contrast is so big that like in John, he seems superhuman before, and then there's this intimacy and small details and touch me in the side. Like
Yeah.
the I am was
Yeah.
kind of turned me on my head to think about that very.
Yeah, to go from these great big things to these very
The
small.
Gospels all do
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah,
They have different-
all these, yeah. Yeah, Candace. And then we'll.
Just to sort of apologetically make a comment about the fact that that the name of God is I am, I
of
was,
course,
I
right.
am,
Yeah.
I will be.
Right. Yeah. I am who I am all that I, yeah, right. I mean, yeah, it's right there. I mean, I think kind of to Kate's point and your point, like, we're talking about how these things show up in the Gospels and then a little bit how they show up in these poems, intended or unintended. I mean, I don't know what Jane's intention was. But the Gospels are playing on all of these deeper scriptural stories. I mean, everything goes back further and further and further. So we, you know, to go back to creation, to go back to the Exodus story in the name of God, right? Like there's all of these layers. Yeah, I think that's always there. Again, for us to see, if we know to look for it. Yes, Mimsy.
Why do you think she entitled this briefly, it enters,
Oh,
when everything else is I
is
am,
I
or
am.
the girl?
Yeah, I don't know.
I
I kind of wonder about that.
Okay.
I don't know the answer, and I do think. I mean, like, what was part of the reason that I reached for this one when I was gathering is because of the title. Because there is this sense of, because all of these resurrection appearances that are in Scripture are just that, like he was there and then he's gone. He's at the table and then he vanishes. He's on the road, he's here, he's there, you know, they look up and he's gone, the ascending is happening, you know. So there is this, and even in the stories from today, you know, we hear Jesus show up in the room twice. He appears, he says it enters, briefly speaks, peace be with you, and then he's gone. You know, I mean, he says a little bit more in the second encounter because he and Thomas have some conversation that they need to have. But there is this kind of brevity to everything of like, oh, he's there, and then he's gone. But I don't know what that's why I reached for it. And then I was like, oh, there's all this other goodness here. But I don't know what her intention was. So
I love the second verse when the I ams are I mean, the whole poem is wonderful. But when the young girl who starves sits down to a table, she will sit beside me. So there's another pronoun, you know.
It is, and
but
it's the only
me.
one that doesn't start I am.
Yeah.
Right? Every other line, and actually I'm missing a gap between 200 years. There should be a space before I am the maker. So all of those stanzas all start with I am, I am, I am, I am, I am, except for that one that you just pulled out. When the young girl who starves sits down to a table, she will sit beside me.
She's the subject of that sentence.
She's the part of it. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so brevity of experiences. We're gonna keep going. On the next page, which has the Merwin poem and a Milosh poem and a Lena Gregg poem, and I think I'm going to do these all out of order. So we're going to start with encounter because we're talking about encounters now, and the kind of wistful, swift, curious. He's there and then he's gone. It's not exactly what this Milosh poem is about, but it's close. So encounter. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive, not the hare nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask, not out of sorrow, but in wonder. This is one of my favorite poems about grief. Again, we can come into this a whole lot of different ways. We don't have to like wedge it into being part of the Jesus story, because I don't think that that was intended necessarily. But I do think that when we, much like the Ross Gay poem about Eric Garner, when we think about what are all these ideas about resurrection have to do with our experiences of the real world that we live in, that is full of life and death and what's next and curiosity. There's this moment, this scene where the two are there and they see the rabbit. That was long ago. Today, neither one of them, it's about memory. Neither of them is alive, not the hare nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask, not out of sorrow, but in wonder. Which again is such an invitation as a way of thinking about how we continue to live in the afterworld when the people that we love are gone. That we're sorrowful. That's not to say that, that's real, very real. But that there's also a little bit of wonder and hope and curiosity about, I don't know what just happened, and I don't know where they went. And all of these stories from Scripture and all of these people trying to talk about it tell me that something still more beautiful could be true, and that I could wonder about that alongside being full of grief and sorrow. So I'll offer you that, and then we'll go back to the Merwin poem, and then we'll pause and talk a little bit. Just now, W.S. Merwin. Just now, in the morning, as the storm begins to blow away, the clear sky appears for a moment, and it seems to me that there has been something simpler than I could ever believe, simpler than I could have begun to find words for, not patient, not even waiting, no more hidden than the air itself that became part of me for a while with every breath and remained with me unnoticed, something that was here, unnamed, unknown in the days and nights, not separate from them as they came and were gone. It must have been here, neither early nor late. Then by what name can I address it now? Holding out my thanks. This is another poem without any punctuation. Hard to read. But trying to kind of you could read it even faster, and that sense of something just happened and I need to tell you about it and I don't have words for it, but it was really great and it was a way, I don't know what to say, but here we are, and it was the breathing, and it was bigger and it was simpler and it was all these things, and thank you. right? That there's this kind of like building power of when we try to say, what just happened? He was here. I saw him. I've seen the Lord, right? And they ran and told everybody, and this just happened, and I have to tell you about it. And I don't have words for it, and it's simpler, but it's complicated, and the clouds part. I mean, the layers and layers and layers of all of that. And in the middle of it, the air that became part of me for a while with every breath, because breath is part of all these things. What name can I address it now? Holding out my thanks. Much like the encounter poem, it happened and I was there and I was paying attention to it and I can remember it and give thanks for that. I saw him in the garden. I saw him in the room. I had breakfast with him. I saw him on the road. He broke the bread and he was there and then he was gone, but he was there I had a moment. There's a real fleeting nature to the stories of Jesus afterwards, and you know that when he says things to people like, don't cling to me, because we want to. Let me grab hold, sit you down in a chair, and don't move again, because now I've got you where I want, right? And can I ask you 1,000 questions about what we want to do that, and there's very little allowance for that. And I think in our lives, the moments are so tender, and then they're gone, and we didn't even know until it was over. Oh, that was it. That was the whole thing, right?
I love the Emmaus. After the Emmaus, were not our hearts burning within us when he was walking with us? Like they didn't recognize him.
But they knew something. Their
Something
bodies knew
was going on.
something. Yeah. Thoughts, response? Yeah, Kate.
All of these poems have given me so much empathy for his apostles.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
they're like right there and they're
They
experiencing all of this. And here
Yes.
we are millennium later and we're still like, what?
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 Yes, yeah.
What?
Yeah. And they're blinded by trauma, and they're all, yes. Yes, a lot of empathy for these. I mean, we kind of beat up on some of these guys, right? But it was hard. It's still hard. Yeah, I think that's
weird.
Yeah. It was weird and strange.
Encounter actually made me think of the concept that the last death is the death of the last person who uttered my name.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah, that as long as there's memory of somebody who knew you, then you're still alive. Yeah.
You need to read A Brief History of the Dead by a Little Rock author named Kevin Brockmeyer. That's the
There'll
whole
be a
fascinating,
book
wild
exchange later
premise. We
coming.
all
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah. And I think, too, when we think about, again, we're trying so hard with our little bitty brains to figure out really big things. But like the Eric Garner poem, like it's helpful and unhelpful to say, oh, he lives on in the garden. Okay, but that just doesn't quite feel satisfactory, right? And, oh, they live on as long as somebody is still telling the story. Okay, yes, that's true. And it's still a pittance for what we really want. Yeah, so I think that, and I do think that when in this Easter season, it's so joyful and all the alleluias, and we stop saying the confession because it's just all good news nonstop, supposedly. But the sense in all of these stories that they're also about our experiences of grief and loss and death, and so then what we hope for. So we have to talk about this side of it, right? Of the missing and the trauma and all of those things. So I just. And there's a reason that our funeral liturgies are Easter liturgies, because they go together. They're intertwined. We can't do one without the other. Yeah.
Forgive me for being a word, but I'm
no forgiveness
struck
needed.
again by the last word in each poem, thanks and wonder.
Yeah.
Isn't that, it's just, says it all.
Right, it really does. And I think, again, for me, most of y'all know that what you get from us when we're teaching or preaching is our own work. You're just getting to witness it, right? I won't speak for anybody else, any other preachers in the room, but yeah,
Amen.
This call to, I need a reminder to approach things with wonder and thanks and possibility and maybe, instead of my tendency, which is grab hold, pin it down, lock the door, keep it neat, And so there is this like, oh, I thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You know, Merwin has another poem called Thanks. And it's a terrible poem about horrible things that happens, and he keeps saying thank you. And it's beautiful. But there is this sense of wonder and thanks and joy and hope. And
the irony is that in both poems from different people, the
Yeah.
last word is
the power,
thanks,
yes.
and the last word is wonder.
Yes, right, is the powerful word there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, I think we have time for one more, and I'm trying to decide which one to do, because they're all great. Okay, we're just gonna, we kind of have to do the manifesto. So sometime you should read for yourself Fishing in the Keep of Silence, in which we learn that God thinks about poetry all the time, which is kind of why I love that poem. And sometime you should read the From Blossoms, but we'll do the manifesto, which is longer but worth it. This is Wendell Berry, our Kentuckian, agrarian, philosopher, essayist, novelist, poet, person. So, manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Love the quick profit, the annual raise, vacation with pay, want more of everything ready-made, be afraid to know your neighbors and to die. And you will have a window in your head. Not even your future will be a mystery anymore. Your mind will be punched in a card and shut away in a little drawer. When they want you to buy something, they will call you. When they want you to die for profit, they will let you know. So friends, every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord. Love the world. Work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Love someone who does not deserve it. Denounce the government and embrace the flag. Hope to live in that free republic for which it stands. Give your approval to all you cannot understand. Praise ignorance, for what man has not encountered, he has not destroyed. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophesy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Listen to the carrion. Put your ear close and hear the faint chattering of the songs that are to come. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. So long as women do not go cheap for power, please women more than men. Ask yourself, will this satisfy a woman satisfied to bear a child? Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth? Go with your love to the fields. Lie down in the shade. Rest your head in her lap. Swear allegiance to what is nighest your thoughts. As soon as the generals and the politicos can predict the motions of your mind, lose it. Leave it as a sign to mark the false trail, the way you didn't go. Be like the fox, who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection. I don't know how old this poem is, but it's so just like, it stays
way
true.
Before the
way
internet.
before, I mean,
It's
before
like-
the internet. I mean, this is like 70s, 80s. Like, this is a long time ago. And he was like, here it is, right? And just stays super relevant. Does anybody have a favorite line or in that? I've got like thousands because it's just sentence after sentence after sentence. But anybody struck by Anne?
Be joyful
Yeah.
that you've considered all the facts.
Yes.
I have that on a coffee mug
Yes.
by Melissa Bridgman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. It's possible to do both. We can be informed, we can know what's going on, and we can be joyful. Yeah. Yeah, Rose.
I have trouble reading up close these days, and I've read the last word is, let me read it again. is instead of practice resurrection, I read practice insurrection.
Oh,
I think there's a little in there.
I think that's
there's a
there.
little in there.
I'll be on your team when you're ready. I'll come with you. Yep. Rose is in charge of the rebellion, y'all. You heard it here. I love that. Yes, and I think because it's so the energy of the poem, right? Of this idea, and I think to think about like what is the connection between insurrection and resurrection, right? People who were expecting one got the other. People who were expecting the other got the one. I mean, yeah.
Just haven't had the opportunity to go to one of our state parks and just sit among all the beautiful green trees
Yeah.
and everything.
Yep.
The say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about what a blessing our park systems and things like that are, and hopefully they continue to be
Yes.
supported.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've probably read this 200 times.
I know, right?
I love this, but I'm still moved every time he says, "Will this disturb the sleep of a woman near to giving birth?" Like to clarify what matters, to just human life coming into the world through the body.
Does this matter
It
compared to
moves
that?
me
Yeah.
every single time.
Yep.
I really like the line, "Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction."
Yeah.
And that's so me. And it reminds me of one of my favorite songs by Kev Mo, "There's more than one way home, ain't no right way, ain't no wrong, whatever road you might be on, find your own way, there's more than one way home." And I just popped in my head because we're in Colorado a lot, and I'm just always fascinated by the little tracks of what little animal is there, and just watching like when what were they after? Were they chasing something, or they like, wait, not either way, this way? And it's just so metaphorically beautiful to my own life, and actually knowing and being in nature and noticing that.
Yeah. I love that
And
simpatico, that the song lyric you've shared, and that sense of there's a lot of find your way home. There's a lot of ways to get home. There's a lot of ways, and I think again, not to like, oh, I can tie this up, but like there's so many different ways that people saw Jesus in the days immediately after, which could suggest that there's not a wrong way for us to see Jesus in the world, right? Like if you feel like that was it, that was the moment, and everybody else can think you're strange and crazy, there's a lot of ways, right? Yeah, so. Right. I think an elephant is like this. I think an elephant is like this, depending on what you've got, what piece of the story you've got. Then an elephant looks like a hose or like a solid, all the things, for sure, or like a big wall. Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of ways to think about that. There's a lot of ways to practice resurrection.